Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As many of you have listened to our program over the years, you know that we like to bring out the benefits of what it means to be as close to nature as possible. And this will also include being able to integrate things such as herbs into a person's lifestyle to get the maximum benefit. Sometimes, though, we leap in thinking more is better, and we don't realize that sometimes the preparations that we get probably aren't up to par to the level that we should be when we use things such as supplementation and whatnot. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is what is known as a generational herbalist. She is with Mountain Spirit Herbal Company, which is located in Port Townsend, Washington. We're going to talk about the harvest, preparation, and health benefits of what is known as rose and rose hips, along with the making of rose elixir. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Denise Joy. Denise, thank you for joining us here on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, let's talk about what rose is and what we're doing here with this and how this can actually help people.
So where do you want me to start?
Right with that question.
Can you, what roses are with us and what they can do for us?
Yes.
Well, roses, that's a very broad question. Roses have been with us since over 25,000 BC. There are documents of roses and roses being used even as far back as 600 BC. For some reason, humankind has decided that the rose is one of the most sensuous plants on the planet. It's been used for obviously an aphrodisiac, but also for making vinegars, for adding to your drinks, for cosmetics, for vitamins, for healing, for bathing in, for wrinkles. It goes on, but I can. Would you like me to expand upon that, or would you like to go to another question?
Well, how about if we just start right here with this? When did you know that you wanted to become an herbalist?
Well, I was 8 years old and had a near-fatal accident, and my great-grandmother called my father, she was the matriarch of our family, and when I was healthy enough to leave the hospital, she told him to send me to her. And from basically that time on, I was about 8.5 years old, I started being trained in the tradition of what I later learned was our family tradition from great-grandmother to great-granddaughter. So I did not understand I was becoming an herbalist, but as I got older, in my early 20s, I had the knowledge, I had the training, but there was no such thing that I knew of as herbalists. We were just people who made things. And there were not products available for my children, so I started making products. So when did I want to become an herbalist? That's a hard question, but I became an herbalist. In the tradition that I grew up in is you had to practice and learn for 20 years before you took the title on. So that would make me about 29, 30 years old is when I took the title as herbalist.
Now, let's talk about your background. Who was the person that actually brought you in and taught you?
My great-grandmother was the first person I learned from. Then one of my teachers was Calvin Kiavi, a kahuna man from Hawaii. Another teacher was a woman named Lynn, who just lived in the backcountry in Oregon when I was 18 years old. I was living there. And then in my early 20s, I worked with another woman named Lauren Cruden. And other than that, I think also the plants have helped me. They're, if you know how to listen to a plant, they're quite loud. And I think the plants have always brought me in. I've always been very sensitive around plants. I've always grown plants. I've always had big gardens. Right now I have almost 2 acres worth of farmland that I take care of and 7 acres worth of wildland that I take care of. And I feel like that also helped bring me to the place where I am now.
Very good. Now, we were talking earlier about roses, and that, a lot of times when people, they pretty much talk about roses or associate them with love, but there are home remedies especially that you deal with here that are created from roses. Let's talk about some of those things that you use them for.
Well, one of the simple things you can do with roses is you can, when they're in early bud, you can start collecting them and putting them in vinegar. And throughout the summer, you just collect your rose petals and you put them in vinegar and you let them soak for a week or so in a sunny window. And then you take out the old rose petals and put new rose petals in. And when it starts to have a slight smell of roses, that can be used for athlete's foot, for mild funguses, such as athlete's foot. For headaches, it was traditionally, the Greeks used it. Traditionally, they would put the vinegar roses on a cloth and put it on your forehead for a really intense headache. Vinegar-soaked roses can also be used as food to help increase your vitamin C. It's good on your face for wrinkles. You can then switch that same idea, and instead of using vinegar, you can put rose petals in witch hazel. And witch hazel, as most everyone knows, is an astringent. So when you add the roses into the witch hazel and soak it in the witch hazel for a really long time, it will, rubbed on the face, pull out wrinkles. It's also been known to help people who have extreme sunburns to cool down the sunburn. Roses also are used in facial creams, cosmetics. You can make rose honey, where you infuse the rose petals the same way you would in vinegar or witch hazel. You would take them and put them in honey and just pack a jar full of rose petals and then pour the warm honey on it and let that sit for a couple hours, and then you can use that on your pancakes.
Well, how about that? I would have never thought using rose with pancakes. That's pretty neat.
Oh, rose pancakes are yummy. So, and in India, they often mix rose petals with black tea because the flavor is quite really good and very much an aphrodisiac. When you put the dried rose petals in with your black tea, preferably not an Earl Grey because that has bergamot in it, but just a plain black tea. The smell of the rose petals comes up when you're drinking your tea.
Now, you were brought up earlier about being able to use rose to, help with headache. So how effective is that?
I don't get very many headaches, but a couple weeks ago I had a friend come visit, and he brought me the flu. It was quite the gift, the one that kept giving for a while. And one of the symptoms of the flu was a headache, and I took some rose vinegar and put it on a cloth and put it on my head and laid down, and within 20 minutes I no longer had a headache. So for me, that was very effective. I can't judge how it's going to be effective for other people, but I just found it very effective for me. I would not assume it would help much for migraines, which are a different type of headache, but for a tension headache, it's very relaxing, and that would help relax you.
Now, I was curious about rose oil and what the difference between that is and essential oils.
Well, rose is one of those plants, and just to back up a little to let you know, it takes, I have a note here about it, something like 10,000 roses to create about 2 drops of rose, what's called the tar. So it takes essentially a truckload of roses to create about an ounce of rose attar. Rose does not go into an essential oil. When you steam distill it, which you do for essential oils, it turns the water, there's very little water, and it turns into this black paste that's really goopy and incredibly, incredibly strong smelling. And that's called rose attar. And so from that, they make perfumes, or they make creams, or they make waxes. I've never done the process, so I can't give you a better description than that. But rose itself does not make an essential oil. An essential oil is from a plant that when you put it in the steam distiller, one part pulls out all of the oils, and the other part pulls out the byproduct, the excess water and things like that. So a plant that has a lot of oil in it would be, say, cedar. If you packed cedar into a steam distill, cedar would make an essential oil, which would be a liquid that is concentrated cedar oil, whereas rose just makes a tar, kind of sticky, gooey base that is so strong smelling that most people couldn't just wear the straight rose attar, and quite expensive.
Now, I'm curious when it comes to, the benefits that are found in rosehip. Can we get a little bit more clarity on what that is?
The benefits of rosehips. Rosehips are used for high vitamin C. You can make a rosehip syrup, which would also give you a vitamin C, and I can tell you how to do that in 1 second. Rosehips are high vitamin C. They're antioxidants, and just really, really strong medicine in the fact that it's also an astringent. So when you have a cold, an astringent is nice because it goes through your system, but it has the bioflavonoids and the vitamin C that most people associate with oranges. And rosehips have probably quite a bit higher, I don't know the exact numbers, of vitamin C in them than an orange does with the bioflavonoids. And one of the things I like to do with rosehips is I take about half a cup of rosehips into 3 cups of water, and I boil that for about an hour at a very, very low temperature, and then I add honey to that and let that heat up so that the honey and the water start evaporating, and then pour that into little jars, and what you end up with is this yummy candied rosehip that is incredibly high in vitamin C and delicious on meats like turkey for Thanksgiving dinner. You can glaze your turkey with it. You can use it just like you would use cranberry sauce at your table. You can use it on your bread with bread and butter, or you can put it in your tea and just mix it up and sweeten your tea with it. But each time you take a teaspoon of it, you're taking lots of vitamin C.
Now, rose has a lot of vitamin C, I understand. How does it stack up against, for instance, citrus?
I think the rose and the rose hips have higher vitamin C than the citrus does. Most of the vitamin C in an orange is actually in the peel, and most of us don't eat the orange peel. And so unless you're eating that white part on an orange peel and even part of the orange peel, you're not getting as much vitamin C as if you eat rose or rose hips.
Wow.
And if you notice, when you buy orange juice in a store, often there's vitamin C added to it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's pretty incredible to think of the benefits of roses. And I was curious, when it comes to it, when is the best time to harvest roses and rose hips?
Well, rose hips, the best time to harvest the hip is after a really cold frost. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it's difficult to harvest rose hips because we have little white worms that like to crawl in the roses before the frost. But if you're in a higher elevation, as soon as you have a good deep frost, and that means going below 32 degrees for, where you wake up and there's frost on your cars or your windshield or, your house, when you have a good deep frost, rose hips are at their highest vitamin C level. And rose hips are what's made after the flower falls off the rose, and it's better there are some roses that grow better rose hips than others. The commercial roses, usually the rose hips aren't as good. The rose flowers are fine, but the hips are better on the wild roses than the domestic roses. And where I live here in Port Townsend, there are wild roses all in our state parks and pretty much in any abandoned lot. I believe Portland also has a lot of wild rose areas. But what you want is after the flower has fallen off and after the frost has been a good deep frost, which here in Port Townsend is usually any time after October 1st, we'll have a good frost. Then you can go out with your basket and harvest your rose hips.
This has all been so eye-opening, and I was kind of curious when it comes to the company, Mountain Spirit Herbals. Tell us about that and how people can find out more.
Well, Mountain Spirit Herbals is owned by me. I'm a sole proprietor, and I live in Port Townsend, Washington, but I also have a website, and my web information is mountainspiritherbals.com.
mountainspiritherbals.com. Very good.
Right. And then I can also be reached through my phone number, which is 360-385-4491. And I'm available for private consultations by donation. And I have a full apothecary of herbal dietary supplement products and creams and balms and salves and syrups. And I also have rose sprays, and I do not make the rosehip syrup for sale, but I'm more than happy to give people the recipe.
Now, tell us before we part of a good home remedy that people can consider using immediately with roses in their yard that they would be able to do easily.
Well, the rose vinegar is a nice, easy one. The other one that's really easy to do is to put the roses, like I talked about, in the witch hazel. So that's good for acne and different skin issues. The rosehip syrup is a lovely, simple remedy to make, but the rose hips aren't available yet. So probably two of the easiest things to do would be to gather your rose petals and dry them. And the easiest way to dry a rose petal, if you're in a hot climate, is to just put it in a paper bag in the back window of your car for a day or two, and then crush those roses and mix them with black tea. That's a culinary treat. The other thing you can do is put rose petals in your lemonade. You can put them in many things. They are incredibly flavored. Another remedy you could do and easily make is take roses and put them in water. And just distilled water is best because there's no minerals in it. And just put the water in your window just like you would the rose vinegar or the rose witch hazel. And when the petals turn brown, take those petals out and add new ones. And you could create your own rose water, which in not Asian food, in Middle Eastern food is used in many, many Middle Eastern dishes.
Excellent. It's been very enlightening to find out that you can do so much with roses besides just hand them over to somebody to express love or friendship. Fantastic.
Right. And you really do not want to use commercial roses from the store because those are heavily sprayed. So the roses that you want to make sure and use are ones that would be organically grown and not very heavily fertilized. Roses do like to be fed, but you want to make sure the food you're giving them is safe for ingesting.
Well, very good, Denise. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. And for our listeners, go ahead and give out your website one more time.
mountainspiritherbals.com.
mountainspiritherbals.com. Find out everything you need. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program, Denise.
Well, thank you very much. And I will be teaching at a conference next week on Woodby Island. So that will also be fun to see people.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also discover more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.